I really look to try and I think we all do as a studio, because it isn't just me. We all try and make work that is not only strong formally and aesthetically, but also connects with people and communicates.
Hi there, everybody. Here is Mario. Welcome to another episode of Design Interview 10 Questions, where we interview designers and design experts from all around the world. Today I talk with Tony Brook. He is the other half of Unit Edition after the other interviewee, Adrian Shaughnessy, but he is also the founder of Spin Studio. So thank you, Tony. Thanks for being here. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
So if you don't mind, I would start with the initial question, which is, what made you become a designer?
My mother made me become a designer. My subject at school was always art. It was the thing that I was best at, and it was the thing that I got the best marks in, and the thing that I enjoyed the most was art. And when I got to about 14 years old, my mother sat me down and said, well, if you want to carry on with art and you want to be involved with art, you've got two choices. You can either be a starving artist, or you could be a commercial artist. And I said, well, what's a commercial artist? And she showed me a newspaper and showed me advertising in the newspaper, in the local newspaper, and said, that's commercial. That's a commercial artist. And I liked the idea of being able to earn a living, being a designer. And so I followed that route. And initially, I was interested in illustration because I was reasonably good at drawing. And then I realized that as I started to explore that a little bit more, I was getting more and more interested in photography. And then I fell in love with typography. So I did the whole sort of journey around the subject, really. But realized that this was at college, later on at college, I realized that typography was my thing, my passion.
And afterwards were like the books, like your passion?
The books, so I've always collected books from being a very young boy. I've always collected books. And I used to go to, we had a local market that sold books for pennies, and I used to buy the books there, and buy them because I liked the covers, essentially, and started to read them, and then became a real big reader. But yeah, I think books have always been important. I've always been surrounded by them, but it's funny because neither my parents are particularly big readers or anything like that. It's just I got the bug really early on when I was very young.
You said that you were buying books mainly because of the book cover, and then you started to read them. Do you think is that for you design, like in a way to do something like catchy for people and invite them to, in this case, reading the books?
I don't know, maybe. The aesthetic, the aesthetic choices that I've made was very ingrained very early on. I had an opinion about what I thought was beautiful and what I wanted to be, what I was attracted to very early on. And I used to collect stamps when I was 5, 6 years old, something like that. And I used to organize them by how I rated them by how beautiful I thought they were. And I put the ugly ones in the back and the beautiful ones in front. And so I suppose a belief in aesthetic value, in beauty, was there very early on of things that I was attracted to. So when we're making a book cover, my hope is that somebody will see it and think it's beautiful. It's an important component of a book cover, of any book cover. It's particularly with something like unit editions, we don't necessarily have to make the same compromises that other publishers might do. Although there are many more publishers like unit editions now, which is great. Not necessarily we were the first, but we're we're not alone anymore. Certainly, there's some beautiful independent publishers that do some really nice work. But I think that, and I can only talk for myself, but my aesthetic opinion is usually based on a gut response, but it there's also an element of function as well, of reason, right? I don't just try and make a pretty book cover that's irrelevant. It's informed, I'd say, about all our design is informed by following a train of thought, a rationale. It's not just.
And we listened from Adrian last time. What is the goal behind unit editions? But you also run Spin, which is a studio in London. And what do you think, like, you create as a designer, like behind, like, the surface of the poster or the book? Like, you're trying to deliver your messages, or I'm
very inspired by Jan van Toorn in this, in that I'm trying to create connection. And it might not be that the dialogue that you can have with any piece of work is obvious, but I think that if there's an intention to connect and communicate, then that comes through. So I'm not designing for myself, although there's an element of designing for myself. I'm definitely wanting to connect. If I'm the only person that looks at something and means something to, then that's a grave disappointment. I really look to try and I think we all do as a studio, because it isn't just me. We all try and make work that is not only strong formally and aesthetically, but also connects with people and communicates. Is important. It's not. I don't see it as being just a moment of or an opportunity for self-expression. Although we're starting to explore that area more.
And to make a book with unit editions, it's has different steps. The process is quite long. Instead, for Spin, is there like a specific part of the process that you are really interested into it?
Well, I think for both things, the processes, if you really strip them back, it wouldn't be that different. There's an element of research, of absorption, and then coming up with ideas and outcomes and approaches, which we tend to share on the wall behind me, to stick up on the wall, and that's an important part of it. But that process of development and absorption and learning is a really important part, and a part of the enjoyment, it's part of the process. it's part of the process that gives you real meaning to the outcome. So, I think ours is a really a balance between enjoying the process and really engaging with the process of making work and the final outcome. They're both equally important. One without the other doesn't really work.
I mean, I also asked you because, especially for Spin, you sometimes like publish also like your typographical experiments. So
Yeah. So we've always had that. We've always made self-initiated projects. I think that we kind of accidentally came across this of the effect of self-initiated projects, but essentially what they do is they give you an opportunity to make something that you may not have a client ask you to do. So, for example, we were getting really, this is one of the first self-initiated projects going way back, was this CD-ROM. And we were interested in that. That was a new technology then. And we were interested in the possibilities that offered. And so that we had to learn how to make little animations, and we had to start to deal with interactivity. And it was all very early days for all that stuff. So we weren't going to be asked to do that. So we did it. We did a little thing for ourselves, and we learned about some of the softwares and the possibilities and what have you. And then that featured on Creative Review CD-ROM. They used to give away a CD-ROM with Creative Review and that feature. And a client happened to see it and say, "Can you do that for us?" And then from that we started making. We made a little sequence of short films, experimental graphic films, and from that, Channel 4 saw that through an advertising agency and asked us to come in, and we ended up doing Channel 4's identity. So there's always been, and even with unit editions, we self-published some papers on various subjects. One was on punk 7-inch singles, another one was on designers' reading lists, and that they went down quite well, and that resulted in the first notions of unit editions and thinking that being a publisher was possible. So the Adventures in Typography are a part of that stream of self-initiated projects, and that's something that we're spending more time with now, and going to put a bit more effort into those self-initiated projects.
And I mean, you're an hardcore collector of books, but also any kind of like design piece.
Yeah.
Do you think perfection exists in design? Because I mean, you probably have a really wide vision of it.
No. What exists in design is we talk about when we create identities, we're talking about visual language, and most of our work is in the creation of identity work. That's what we do most of the time, and we talk about visual language. And you notice I say identity and not branding, because an identity is a nuanced thing. You have a very sophisticated identity. We all do as human beings. So we can be happy, we can be sad, we can be joyous, we can jump around, we can be quiet. But we always know. I always know it's you. You always know it's me, right? And that's the way that I see identities. Essentially, is flexible and nuanced. And I think that we're as far as perfection goes, people change. And so does graphic design. And if you look at it literally as a language, what's considered beautiful by one generation is discounted by another. And so it's always moving and it's always developing much, much faster than, say, other disciplines might. So if you're in architecture, then the by necessity you have a much slower development of styles and approaches and what have you. In graphic design, it's very, very active and very fast changing. Although some of the basics stay the same, there's a lot of change in it. So even if you just talk about the use of white space, the use of space and how that affects things changes from generation to generation. If you can almost tell when something was done by the kerning in the letters about which period it was. So it's perfection just isn't a thing. It's not. There've been a number of designers, famous designers, who tried to say the last word on graphic design is this. There is no last word on graphic design. There's no last word on language either. I mean, like the idea of trying to protect a language and stop it changing and stop it being influenced by outside influences by other languages is just ridiculous. It's an organic thing, and so is graphic design.
And what do you think about contemporary design?
I love it. It's fantastic. It's great. I mean, it's wonderful. There are so many really, really interesting things going on and challenging things going on. Not necessarily mainly in the UK either, there was a time when I think the UK was definitely one of the leading lights in graphic design, but now I think there's wonderful stuff being made all over the world, and in places that you wouldn't have expected it to ordinarily, it's now really taking hold. So I think it's fantastic, and there's a lot of beautiful work being made.
And regarding the impact of internet on design?
Well, there was a point, I think, where it started to get a little bit similar, and you'd see that people would copy or sort of repeat things that they'd seen other people do, but not necessarily know why. So one thing I would say is that if you're going to create something, and this is something that I remember Mark Holt, who was a founder member of AVO, which is a British design studio, said to me, he said, if there's always a story. For a genuine design, there's always a story. And so if you've appropriated something and just taken it from someone else and whacked it on your thing, there's no story. That's the story, right? But if you create something, you've gone through a process of thinking and discovery and absorption, and there's a reason. You can end up making things, and I've done this, you can end up making things that is the same as somebody else made, accidentally, like without knowing, and gone, oh my God. But if you talk about the story to the two people who made it, there'll be different stories and different reasons why they ended up in the same place. So, I think that's really the key. And that's the exciting thing. I don't see where the satisfaction of copying what someone else has done is, essentially.
But don't you think like the internet opened too much, like the field for everyone, and now is a bit like saturated?
Well, what I think is it pushes you on. One of the reasons that I think that Unit Editions has been an interesting publisher is because, and I don't know how true it is, but quite often you'll come across things and you don't know who designed them or when they designed it or how they designed it on the internet. And I'd like to think that at some point, any designer that's worth anything, at some point is going to start to be curious about this work that they see and who made it and why they made it. And that's essentially what Unit Edition's function is to tell the stories of designers and why they made what they made when they made it, and introduce these stories and these lives and these things, celebrate them, because you could say that well, I had a fear that everything would become kind of the same, but it doesn't. It doesn't become kind of the same. It's like if you look at the international style of architecture and look how it manifests itself in Brazil and in India, say, it's completely different to how it is in Central Europe or America. So it's kind of lost in translation in a way. That things change, things become developed. A good comparison would be music in Jamaica, where they don't have copyright laws and anybody can copy anything, but you only take notice of things that change things in meaningful ways and that are challenging and interesting. So if everybody does the same kind of thing, you're going to be ignored, which is fair enough, really.
And at Spin, you usually have interns, so you probably see like the difference year by year, changing the interns. And how do you see design education today?
It's very different in different parts of the world. Right. So if I talk a little bit about interns, hold on, I'm just going to have to. Before we used to get interns, right, and we wouldn't really know what to do with them, to be honest. We tried to give them little bits and pieces to do, and they would sit around and look on the internet and do little bits and pieces. They weren't really a part of the studio, and that was our fault, right? So we changed our attitude completely, and we decided to integrate them fully into the studio, to not look at them as interns essentially, but to look at them as people that could contribute in a really meaningful way. So that they're given real responsibility, they're included in the projects, and it's so much more satisfying. So it's more satisfying for them because they're feeling the heat of being in a studio, but it also makes things a bit more complicated because they need to have skills to be able to contribute, right? So, they need to have reasonable skills. So they've become a really important part of the studio. What you have to do is you have to question why are you using interns, right? Or not using interns? Why have an internship program? It's because essentially we're a small studio, right? There's only like half a dozen of us all told. So there was a period where we were saying no to everybody, right? People would write, can I come and do? No, we don't use interns. And that just felt bad. It felt negative. So what I'd like to think is that when an intern comes in here, if someone gets an internship here, they get a good experience, they get a real experience, and they get something that means that they can go on and work in another studio, and they can contribute straight away. So they're involved in all the different conversations, and they get real responsibility and real experience, and then they're useful and they can go on. So I think I'd love to think that we give them something, that they can take away with them. But that said, when they come in, they have to be able to help, as well. So they have to have some skills and be able to help. I think having a degree of technical skill is a definite advantage.
And do you think design education is providing students of new generation with that?
It really varies. It really varies massively. And I couldn't even be general about it. I think that some individuals really push themselves technically and learn the requisite digital skills, and some it just doesn't float their boat, or they're not interested and they don't. I think it's one thing I must say though is it's much more difficult now than it was when I was coming out of university. There was some technical skills that were required that I had to learn, but there were no computers, and so the kind of skills were more like craft skills, painting and stuff like that, painting typography or drawing it or making artwork and stuff. Whereas now it's a much more challenging environment technically. And it's a very rare person that has that combination of creativity and technical ability.
And I mean, you mentioned before that today is often used that there are independent publishers and studios and so on. Mm. Do you think the role of the designer is going in this direction in the future?
I think it is. I think the current situation shows that we need more flexible and developed ways of working. We're not going to be able to, for the foreseeable future, work in the way that we have in the past, because of the virus and because basically the world's changing. So I think that the way I see Spin is that we're a creative hub. We have we have a lot of expertise and a lot of experience in a certain area in graphic design, but we're interested in creating and contributing to other areas. We're not in a graphic design ghetto. We're not just assigned to, our lot is not just to be graphic designers and that's it. Now, in today's world, we can be different things, and so can everybody else. So I think that's going to be the future, is that we have the tools now, the technical tools, to be able to make proposals and make ideas in any area, be it product design, fashion, whatever is interesting to us. And we don't need to be a big studio of 100 people to be able to deliver really meaningful and important work for our clients. Just because you've got 100 people doesn't mean you're going to do a better job than us or you. So I think the way that design's purchased and the way that it's used is going to change. But there's more graphic design now than there's ever been, because there are more screens than there have ever been, and there's more motion, there's more opportunity for communication and for motion and for form, for typography, for all forms of graphic design.
We arrived to the last question, which is, what do you think the design world can do for this global pandemic?
It can communicate. I don't know that it's, are you talking about independently, what you can do as a designer independently? Or are you talking about how, I suppose, what we can be good citizens, which is a fundamental thing, which I think designers have always been aware of and always been concerned with, and not just in this pandemic, but just in general, that we can try to do the right thing. We can try to communicate good messages, positive messages. We can try to put less plastic in the sea. We can try to use good materials when we work. I think, I can't say all, but many designers are concerned with not being a burden on society, but contributing to it. And so we can make the choices that we make as designers can influence the world to some degree, and that it's something that's a concern for all of us.
Well, thank you very much, Tony. It was nice to talk to you. Thank you for your time.
All right. Take care.